Hello and welcome to the Mind Lab. You know, the human body is amazing. Right now, you are doing hundreds of things and creating molecules to keep you going. This week, we are looking at one of the most important molecules that literally keeps you running, ATP. ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is the molecule that provides our cells and other animal cells with energy. It all starts with cellular respiration, which produces energy from the food that we eat. Let's start with this here. All that glucosey goodness will soon be in my bloodstream and start creating energy. So we know we need glucose, a compound made up of 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens and 6 oxygens. But we also need 6 O2 oxygen molecules to make 6 CO2 carbon dioxides, 6 H2Os, water, and that all-important energy. But we can't just run on this energy. For our bodies to use this, we will need to convert it to ATP, a very specific store of energy. How do our cells use ATP? Well, adenosine triphosphate is made up of a nitrogenous base called adenine, a sugar called ribose, and 3 phosphate groups attached to it. These 3 phosphates hate being together, and so ATP solves that problem by shooting one of the phosphates off and becoming ADP, or adenosine diphosphate. When the phosphate is shot off, it creates energy that can be used. Now, a hydroxide will come over and replace that 3rd phosphate, allowing adenosine diphosphate to get on a lot happier. We have seen how ATP can be used. Let's see how it is created through cellular respiration. Most sources say that 1 molecule of glucose can yield around 29 to 38 molecules of ATP and a bit of heat. Cellular respiration isn't something that happens all at once. It can be broken down into 3 different stages: glycolysis and the Krebs cycle, which we will be looking at in this episode, and the electron transport chain, or ETC, which we will look at next episode. For this, we are going to look at each stage one after the other, but in reality, they are all happening at the same time. Glycolysis is the first stage of cellular respiration, in which glucose is broken down, hence the name glycolysis. Glyco, glucose, and lysis, from the Greek word for separate. The glycolysis stage occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell, as the glucose is too big to enter the mitochondria. The sugar, glucose, a 6-carbon molecule, starts the process of glycolysis. The glucose is broken down into 2, 3 carbon molecules called pyruvic acids. The old saying of if you want to make money, you have to spend money, in a way applies to ATP. Glycolysis needs 2 molecules of ATP to actually happen. So you need to spend some ATP to get some ATP. Ultimately, it will generate 4 ATP molecules with an overall net gain of 2 ATPs, 2 pyruvates, and 2 NADH, which is from NAD+ pairing with energized electrons and hydrogen to create small storehouses of energy, which will later be used to make ATP. Now we're going to head over to our expert, who is going to tell you how you can apply this to an exam-style question.
Hello. When it comes to the exam, you need to remember that there are always a few answers to 1 or 2 mark questions. For example, in a 2014 biology exam, the following 2 mark question was asked. Respiration produces more ADP per molecule of glucose in the presence of oxygen than it does when oxygen is absent. Explain why. Now, the answers that are acceptable would be oxygen is the final or terminal electron acceptor. Oxygen combines with electrons and protons. Oxidative phosphorylation, electron transport chain provides ADP. Only glycolysis occurs without oxygen. No Krebs, no link reaction. Remember this when it comes to your exam. See you next time.
Welcome back. Here we are still talking about glycolysis. Glycolysis can either be aerobic or anaerobic process. In the absence of oxygen, glycolysis will happen through anaerobic respiration, and the pyruvate go into a process of fermentation. Without oxygen, there is more need for NAD+ to keep glycolysis going. Fermentation frees some NAD+, which creates byproducts. In yeast, the byproduct would be ethyl alcohol. Us humans are not getting drunk from glycolysis. We instead get lactic acid, which is what makes your muscles feel sore after you have worked them out. So, out of this anaerobic respiration, we have produced NAD by freeing up the hydrogen to make lactic acid. The next two stages of cellular respiration, the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, are aerobic processes, which means they require oxygen. The Krebs cycle is what we are going to be looking at next, which is sometimes referred to as the citric acid cycle. This isn't happening in cytoplasm like glycolysis. This time it's across the inner membrane of the mitochondria, which are seen as the power centers of the cell. The Krebs cycle takes those pyruvate molecules you developed in glycolysis and reworks them into making 2 more ATPs per glucose molecule, and some other forms of energy that we will come to later. One of the pyruvates is oxidized, which means it's combined with oxygen molecules. One of the carbons from the pyruvate's 3 carbon chain bonds with an oxygen molecule and leaves the cell as CO2, leaving a 2-carbon compound by the name of acetyl coenzyme A. Another NAD+ comes along and picks up a hydrogen and becomes NADH acetyl coenzyme A, joins together with a 4-carbon molecule oxaloacetic acid to form a 6-carbon molecule called citric acid. The citric acid is then oxidized many times, removing carbons to get back to oxaloacetic acid to bring the cycle back to the beginning, making it a cycle. As carbons leave the citric acid, there are leftovers in the form of CO2, which are exhaled by the cell and later by us. Each time a carbon comes off the citric acid, some energy is made, but it's not ATP. So that was 2 parts of how to make ATP and keep your body running. That's it for this episode. Don't forget that over on our website, there is a quiz to test your knowledge. Please subscribe and check out our social media. Next week in biology, we will be looking at the electron transfer chain. We've been the Mind Lab. Thanks for watching.